Hey guys, tonight we are settling into the deeply unexciting, yet foundational, world of ancient grains. We're not talking about epic battles or cursed pharaohs' tombs. No, we're going much, much further back, to a time before any of that mattered, to the very dawn of agriculture. Picture this: you're not a king or a conqueror, you're just cold. The morning chill seeps through the animal hides covering your frame. As you stand at the edge of a clearing, the air is damp, smelling of wet earth and the faint, sweet scent of wild grasses heavy with dew. Your stomach grumbles, a constant, low-level companion. You skin the stands of wild emmer and einkorn wheat, their seeds still weeks away from being ripe enough to easily harvest, and pound into something vaguely resembling edible paste. This is your life, a relentless cycle of foraging and moving, dictated entirely by the whims of nature. You have no granary, no surplus. One bad season, one failed hunt, and your family fades into the silence of the forest. The sheer precariousness of it all is something you feel in your bones. You probably wouldn't survive a month in this reality, let alone thrive. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're there in the comments, feel free to post your location and local time. It is always fascinating to see where in the world this quiet little community is tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are part of a small band, maybe 2 dozen people, nestled in a region later known as the Fertile Crescent. Life is a continuous, exhausting search for calories. Your knowledge is immense but specific. You know every edible root, every berry patch, the migratory patterns of the gazelle herds. But your focus today is on the grasses. You watch the stands of wild wheat and barley through the seasons, noting which patches are the thickest, which seem to ripen first. This isn't a scientific observation. It's born of hunger, of a desperate need for predictability in an unpredictable world. You use a simple sickle made of a sharpened flint blade set into a curved wooden handle, a monumental technological innovation that, frankly, doesn't feel all that innovative when your back is aching from being bent over for hours. You sweep the sickle through the grasses, gathering the precious seed heads. Most of it is consumed quickly, a tedious process of parching over a fire and then pounding with a stone mortar and pestle to create a rough, chewy gruel. It's monotonous, it's fibrous, and it's the difference between life and death. But then, something happens, a tiny, mundane miracle. You notice that around last year's campsite, where you spent a few days processing grain, new plants have sprung up. Some of the seeds you accidentally scattered, some from waste, have taken root in the disturbed, fertile soil near your settlement. This is the moment, not a lightning bolt of inspiration, but a slow, dawning realization over generations. What if you didn't just harvest what was there? What if you could put it there? You take a handful of the best seeds you've gathered, the biggest, the hardiest, and instead of eating all of them, you deliberately scatter them in a cleared area by the water source. You push them into the soft earth with a digging stick. It feels wasteful. You're burying food. But the hope, faint as a whisper, is that it might come back as more food later. This is the birth of sowing. It is not a revolution but a hesitant, nervous experiment repeated by countless anonymous people over centuries. The change is glacial. You don't suddenly become a farmer. You are a forager who occasionally gardens. You still follow the herds, but you return to certain places, year after year, to tend your little patches. Slowly, imperceptibly, the plants begin to change because of your actions. You naturally select for the seeds that don't shatter and scatter to the wind when ripe. They ray harder to harvest in the wild, but they stay on the stalk waiting for your sickle. You select for larger seed sizes. You are, without knowing it, engaging in the world's slowest, most boring genetic engineering project. Historians still argue whether this was a conscious decision or a gradual, unconscious process of coevolution between humans and plants. Did we domesticate wheat, or did wheat, with its abundant calories and seductive predictability, domesticate us? It tied us to the land, to a specific plot. It created the concepts of surplus, of storage, of waiting. Your entire worldview shifts from a horizontal plane of movement to a vertical one of depth. What can you dig into, store away, build upon? The mainstream historical fact here is the location. The Fertile Crescent, around 10,000 BCE, is widely accepted as one of the primary, if not the primary, birthplace of agriculture. The quirky tidbit is what archaeologists call the founder crops, the first suite of plants to be domesticated. This original grocery list included emmer wheat, einkorn wheat, hulled barley, lentils, peas, chickpeas, and flax. It was a Neolithic meal kit, and your life, while seemingly simpler, becomes paradoxically more difficult. Studies of skeletal remains from these early agricultural societies show a decline in health, more tooth decay from starch-rich diets, more arthritic injuries from the repetitive toil of grinding grain, and shorter statures due to nutritional deficiencies compared to their hunter-gatherer predecessors. You traded the varied, protein-rich diet of a forager for the reliable, carbohydrate-heavy monotony of a farmer. You traded acute risks a bad hunt for chronic ones of failed harvest that dooms your entire settled community. You are now, for better and overwhelmingly for worse, tied to this land and these golden stalks. Your future, and the future of all human civilization, will be measured in harvests. The dream, if you can even call it that, has solidified into a backbreaking reality. You are no longer a part-time forager dabbling in a little light gardening. You are a farmer. The word feels heavy, final, like the soil that now perpetually cakes your hands and lodges under your fingernails. That hopeful little plot by the river has expanded, demanding more of you, of your family, of every waking moment. Your world has shrunk to the boundaries of your fields, and your calendar is no longer dictated by the migration of beasts, but by the inexorable cycle of the grain itself. The sun, once a benevolent source of warmth, is now a brutal taskmaster, and you spend your days in a silent, sweaty negotiation with it. You rise before it crests the hills, your body protesting with a chorus of aches that have become as familiar as your own heartbeat. This is the true cost of that surplus. This is the mundane life you've chosen, or perhaps that has chosen you. Your most valuable tool, besides your weary body, is the art. Don't let the fancy name fool you. It's essentially a glorified stick, a crooked branch, really, with a pointed tip hardened in the fire. You drag it through the earth, your shoulders straining against the leather harness, carving a faint scratch into the soil of furrow. It's not a plow that turns the earth over, it just gouges a line, a primitive guideline for planting. Behind you, a child or another member of your small community walks, bent double, dropping precious seeds into this shallow trench. Another follows, kicking soil over them. It's a slow, rhythmic, mind-numbing procession. There is no beast of burden to share the load. That innovation is millennia away. Every ounce of energy invested in this field comes directly from the food you've already consumed. It's a calorie equation with terrifyingly narrow margins. Then, the wait. This is perhaps the most psychologically grueling part. You've buried your food in the ground. You've gambled. Now, you watch the sky. Too little rain, and the seeds will lie dormant, then perish. Too much, and they'll rot in their earthly graves. You watch for birds, for insects, for any sign of blight. You are tied to this place, a prisoner of your own investment. You can't simply pick up and follow the herds anymore. You have to see this through. The days stretch into weeks. And then, a miracle so mundane it is almost painful. The first green shoots push through the dark soil. Rows of tiny, defiant promises. Relief washes over you, a physical sensation. But it's short-lived, because now, the real work begins. Weeding. If there is a more universally tedious, never-ending, and utterly thankless task in all of human history, it has yet to be invented. The same sun that coaxes your wheat from the ground also encourages a staggering variety of other plants to compete for the same soil, the same water, the same light. You spend days on your hands and knees, fingers scrabbling in the dirt, pulling up invaders by the root. Your back is a permanent arch of protest. The soil stains your skin, grinds into your knees. There is no glory here, no skill, just repetitive, monotonous labor. You develop a deep, personal hatred for specific weeds. This is where the mind wanders, where time loses all meaning. You are alone with the heat, the insects, and the immense, crushing boredom of ensuring your survival one pulled weed at a time. The mainstream historical fact of this era is the sheer, unadulterated physical toll of early agriculture. Bioarchaeological evidence from the period shows a marked increase in spinal deformities, osteoarthritis in the knees and hips, and dental microwear patterns consistent with a gritty, grain-based diet that wore teeth down to stumps. You are quite literally working yourself into the ground. The quirky, almost absurd tidbit is the invention of the art itself. It seems so simple, but it represented a massive cognitive leap. The idea of preparing a field, a dedicated space, rather than just poking holes for individual seeds. Historians still argue whether this tool was invented once and spread like gossip, or if it was independently stumbled upon by multiple bored desperate farmers across the world, who were all just trying to make their lives slightly easier and failing miserably. The debate is a quiet one, much like the work itself, And then, finally, the grain ripens. The field turns a pale, beautiful gold, swaying in the breeze. It is a sight that would take your breath away if you had any breath left to give. The harvest is a frantic, community-wide event. There is no time to waste. You take up your flint-bladed sickle again. But now the work is intensified, a race against weather and predators. You grasp a bunch of stalks in one hand and slice with the other, over and over, your hands becoming raw and blistered. The cut stalks are gathered into sheaves. The work is faster than weeding, but more urgent, more stressful. You feel the pressure of the coming days. This golden bounty is vulnerable. A single thunderstorm could flatten it. A plague of locusts could devour it in hours. You work until your muscles scream and your vision blurs, driven by a primal fear of losing it all. The surplus is within reach, but it is not yet secure. You have successfully traded the acute danger of the hunt for the chronic, grinding anxiety of the harvest. Progress, it seems, has a very peculiar definition. The scratch of a stylus on a damp clay tablet is the sound of your new world order. It's a soft, slick, gritty sound, and it is more intimidating than any war cry. You stand in the shade of a mud brick building, the Mesopotamian sun a physical weight on your head, waiting your turn. You are no longer just a farmer. You are a subject, a producer, a cog in a machine that is just now, creakily, inventing itself. The surplus you bled for in your field didn't just feed your family. It built this civilization, and with it comes the accountant, your cart, piled high with sheaves of barley, your season's toil, your family's security. Your future feels insignificant before the granary. It's a monumental structure of sun-baked brick, towering and imposing, its walls thick and cool. It represents power, a power not of muscles and spears, but of organization and control. It is the stomach of the city-state, and you are here to feed it. A man with carefully trimmed hair and a clean kilt sits at a small table, his face a mask of bureaucratic indifference. He doesn't look at you, not really. He looks at your grain. He assesses its quality with a practiced eye, running a handful through his fingers, checking for moisture, for chaff, for anything that might compromise the city's precious reserve. You feel a prickle of anxiety. This man, who has never weeded a field or felt a sickle blister his palm, holds your fate in his hands. He picks up his stylus. The tablet before him is already marked with neat, precise cuneiform impressions, wedges and lines that are utterly meaningless to you, but which tell him everything. They are lists, inventories. Your contribution is about to become a number. He speaks a figure, his voice monotone. It's less than you hoped for. The assessment for the temple, the tax for the authority, the fee for the scribe himself, it's all deducted in his head, calculated according to rules you will never fully understand. A portion of your grain is weighed and measured out into a standard basket, then carried away into the deep, dark, cool interior of the granary by laborers who move with a tired efficiency. You watch it disappear. That was your safety net, your hard-won surplus, now absorbed into the anonymity of the state's wealth. In return, the scribe makes a new mark on your tablet. This is your receipt. This mark guarantees you a right to a portion back in lean times, or perhaps payment for work on the city's irrigation ditches. It is a promise baked in clay. You have to trust the system. You have no other choice. This is the birth of writing. Forget poetry and epic tales. The first words ever deliberately written were almost certainly things like 29 measures of barley, 3rd month, Kurush. It was inventory. It was accounting. The quirky, almost laughable tidbit is that most of the earliest cuneiform tablets we've dug up aren't about gods or kings. They're about beer. Specifically, the rationing of barley for beer production for workers. The mundane need to manage grain and labor with brutal efficiency is what gave us literature, history, law. All of it sprung from the need to count bushels of grain. Your own world is now defined by the system. Your life is one of mud and grain. You spend your off-seasons not in rest, but in corvée labor, your compulsory duty to the state. You are put to work maintaining the lifeblood of this entire agrarian society, the irrigation canals. You trudge through shin-deep, sucking mud, digging out silt with a woven basket, strengthening the banks with more mud bricks that you yourself will have to form and bake. The work is as monotonous as weeding, but heavier, more collective. You are a single ant in a colony, and the colony must survive. The sun beats down, reflecting off the water in the canals, and the air hums with mosquitoes. Historians still argue whether this centralized control of irrigation was the necessary catalyst for the first states, or if the states emerged first, and then seized control of the water to consolidate their power. It's a chicken or egg debate fought over ancient hydrological maps, And the grain in that granary, it doesn't just sit there. It is the economy. It pays the soldiers who protect the city walls. It feeds the artisans who make the tools and the pottery. It supports the priests who intercede with the gods for the all-important annual flood. And it fills the belly of the king, who is the human embodiment of the city's fortune. Your backache, your blisters, your sun-scorched skin, all of it is converted, through this miraculous and terrifying alchemy of bureaucracy, into power. You have traded the simple anxiety of the harvest for the complex, layered anxiety of taxation, assessment, and social obligation. You are no longer just a person. You are a producer, a taxpayer, a subject. You built the granary with your labor, and now it, in turn, built a world that holds you firmly, and forever, in its grasp. The sound is different here. It's not the dry, hot wind of Mesopotamia, but the thick, humid air of the Nile Valley, heavy with the smell of water, of mud, of blooming lotus, and of uncountable millions of people living cheek by jowl. The constant, low hum of human activity is punctuated by the sharp cry of a gull and the lap of water against stone. You are in Egypt, and the rhythm of your life is no longer dictated by the anxious watch of the sky for rain, but by the river itself. The Nile is everything. It is your god, your clock, your calendar, and your taskmaster. And right now, the air is electric with the tension that has been building for months. The inundation is coming. You stand on the bank, your feet sinking slightly into the rich, black silt kemet, the black land. That's what they call this place. This stark contrast between the life-giving black soil of the floodplain and the relentless, deadly red desert that surrounds it. You watch the river. It is slow, languid, but there's a new power in its current. The water is changing color, turning a thick, chocolatey brown. Far to the south, in the highlands you will never see. The rains have come. The message has been passed down river from village to village. The flood is coming. This is not a disaster. This is the entire point of the year. This is the event upon which your entire civilization is built. The river is about to give its gift, and your job is to be ready to receive it. The bureaucracy here makes the Mesopotamian scribe look like an amateur. You are a laborer, part of a vast, organized workforce that is the engine of the pharaoh's kingdom. Before the floodwaters even arrive, you are put to work. Your task is to repair and strengthen the vast network of dikes and basins that crisscross the floodplain. This is math made physical, using ropes knotted at precise intervals and simple sighting tools. Priests and scribes direct you where to pile the mud, where to reinforce a wall. The goal is not to stop the flood, but to tame it, to guide the life-giving water and the precious silt it carries into specific basins, where it will sit for weeks soaking into the earth, depositing its fertile bounty before draining away. You are a single cell in a massive, hydrological organism, and you understand your place. Then, it arrives. It's not a terrifying wave, but a relentless, quiet rise. The river swells, day by day, creeping up the banks you just repaired, spilling into the canals, filling the basins. The world becomes a shallow, brown lake. For weeks, you cannot work the fields. They are underwater. This is the closest you ever get to a vacation, but it's a nervous one. The entire country is on pause, waiting. Your survival, and the survival of everyone you know, depends on the granaries. And this is where the Egyptian system reveals its terrifying, brilliant efficiency. You line up. Everyone lines up. You are here to collect your ration. The mainstream historical fact is the absolute centrality of the Nile's inundation to every aspect of Egyptian life. Their calendar was divided into 3 seasons: Akhet inundation, Purit growing, and Shamu harvest. Their entire existence was synced to this single, annual event. The quirky tidbit is what you're here to collect. Bread and beer, not glamorous, artisanal stuff. This is the industrial-grade fuel of the state. The bread is often gritty from sand and stone chips from the grinding process. And the beer is a thick, lumpy, low-alcohol gruel, but it's calories, it's life, it's your payment for the work you've done and the work you will do. The rationing is precise, hierarchical, and impersonal. A scribe, just like his Mesopotamian counterpart, but perhaps with a little more imperial haughtiness, checks your token, a piece of pottery with your work gang's designation, and marks his papyrus scroll. Your daily allotment is measured out in units of bread and jars of beer. Historians still argue over the exact nutritional value and alcohol content of this ancient beer, debating whether it was a safe source of hydration or a mild daily intoxicant for the masses. You don't care about the debate. You care that it's filling. You take your coarse, flat loaf and your jar of beery porridge. This is the pharaoh's bounty. This is what your taxes, paid in grain, have been transformed into. The state has taken your labor, stored your grain, and now returns it to you as a daily wage. It is a perfect, closed loop of control. When the waters recede, leaving the land soaked and fantastically fertile, the pace of work becomes frantic. There is no need to plow deeply. You follow behind oxen dragging a simple wooden plow, but mostly, you are scattering seed by hand onto the wet mud. Then, you release the pigs, or you yourself trample the seed into the rich, black earth, a practice so common it's depicted in tomb paintings. The work is messy, chaotic, and exhausting, but the growing season is short and intense. The grain seems to leap from the ground. Soon, you will be back in the fields, under the burning sun, harvesting, and then, you will stand in another line, to deliver your portion to the granary of the Pharaoh. The cycle is endless, predictable, and secure. You are a node in a network, a worker ant in the world's most stable and long-lasting pantry. The boredom is profound, but so is the safety. The river gives, the state takes, and the state gives back. You are, for now, fed. The sound that defines your life is no longer the whisper of reeds or the scratch of a scribe's stylus. It is a sound of relentless, metallic order, the crunch of your calichi, your hobnailed sandals, on a gravel road. Left dot left dot right. 1,000 men moving as one. A machine of flesh and iron trudging across the face of the known world. You are a legionary of Rome. You are the sharp end of the empire. And in your stomach, with every step you take, is the same thing. It is always the same thing. Pulse. Wheat porridge. The monotonous fuel of conquest. Your world is a spectrum of discomfort. At one end, the blistering heat of a Gallic summer. Your wool tunic soaked with sweat under the weight of your leather armor and mail. At the other, the bone-deep chill of a Germanian forest, where the mist never seems to lift. But through it all, the one constant, the anchor of your existence, is your grain ration. Every day, the quartermaster's man, does the rounds. He carries a measured sack, and into your outstretched hands, he pours your daily frumentum roughly 2 pounds of hard, dry wheat berries. This is your pay. This is your life. It is unexciting. It is unchanging. And it is the absolute bedrock upon which the legions march. The routine is sacred. At the end of a brutal day's march 20 miles in full kit, because the empire waits for no one, the first order of business isn't rest. It's setting up the castra, the fortified camp. And within that camp, the first structures to rise are the kitchen fires. You are divided into 8-man tent parties, your contubernium, and you are a family bound by a shared mess kit, one of you, on a rotating basis that is the subject of more arguments than tactics, has the duty of cooking. He takes the group's collective wheat ration, about 16 pounds of it, and begins the tedious process of turning rock-hard berries into edible paste. He grinds it, not finely, with a small hand mill. The grit from the millstones will be part of your meal. You've accepted this. Then, he adds water and boils it in a bronze pot over the fire, stirring constantly until it thickens into a bland, gloppy gruel. This is your dinner, night after night, campaign after campaign. You might get a little laridum salt pork to chop into it if you're lucky, or some garum, the fermented fish sauce that is the ketchup of the Roman world, to give it a salty, funky kick. But the base is always the same, wheat. You eat it from your wooden bowl, sitting on your pack, your body aching with a fatigue so profound it feels like a physical object. You don't taste it anymore. You consume it. It is fuel. It is the calorie-dense ballast that will get you through the next 20-mile march, the next skirmish, the next watch in the freezing dark. The mainstream historical fact here is the sheer scale of the Roman grain supply chain. To keep its legions fed, Rome needed to source, store, and transport millions of tons of wheat every year, from Egypt, from Sicily, from North Africa. The quirky tidbit is what you drink with your pulse, pauska. This was the legionaries' beverage, a mixture of cheap, sour wine vinegar and water. It was refreshing, slightly antiseptic, likely saving countless lives from waterborne diseases, and hilariously unpalatable to anyone who wasn't a desperately thirsty soldier. It was the perfect companion to your monotonous meal. This wheat-centric diet is more than just sustenance. It's a cultural identifier. You look at the Germanic tribes you're fighting, and you see them subsisting on meat, milk, and barley, a diet you view as primitive, barbaric. You are a bread-eater, a man of civilization, of order. Your wheat porridge is what separates you from the chaos of the forest. It is the food of cities, of law, of the legion. Historians still argue whether this logistical focus on grain was the empire's greatest strength, or its most critical vulnerability. A single bad harvest in Egypt or a fleet destroyed by a storm could trigger a crisis that would ripple all the way to the frontiers, threatening the stability of the entire empire. Your full stomach was the true border of Rome, and when you are eventually discharged, your service done, your reward is often not land, but a guaranteed monthly ration of grain from the state. Even in retirement, your life is measured in modi of wheat. The empire has conditioned you, from your first day as a recruit to your last day as a pensioner, to see this golden grain as the ultimate symbol of safety, order, and Romanness. It is boring, it is repetitive, it is the same meal, day in, day out, for 25 years. But as you chew your tasteless gruel under a foreign sky, you know, with absolute certainty, that this dull, reliable mush is the very thing that conquered the world. The sound that pulls you from a sleep so deep it feels like death is not a rooster, but a church bell, a single, mournful tone ringing through the pre-dawn blackness, so cold and damp it feels less like air and more like a blanket of wet wool. It is the matins bell, calling the monks to their first prayers of the day. For you, it is not a call to prayer, but a call to work. You are a peasant on a manor in medieval England, and the bell is the voice of your entire world, a world that is small, cold, and dictated by the relentless, unchanging turn of the agricultural wheel. You swing your legs off the rough-hewn sleeping platform, your joints cracking a protest that is swallowed by the single room you share with your family, your livestock, and the ever-present, choking smell of wood smoke and dung. You pull on the same tunic you wore yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. It is coarse, scratchy, and permanently stained with earth and sweat. You step out into the gloom. The world is shades of gray. The Lord's domain, the best land, lies fallow this year. A rest you yourself are never allowed. Your own strips in the open fields are a patchwork of different grains, rye, mostly, some barley, a little wheat if you're very lucky and your soil is good. This is the three-field system. It is the height of agricultural planning, and it dictates your life with the rigidity of a prison sentence. Your breath plumes in the air as you trudge towards the strip you are assigned to work today. Your tools are simple, almost pathetic, a heavy, wooden plow that requires a team of oxen you don't own, or a simple iron-tipped digging stick for the more meticulous work. You are part of a collective, a village that must work together to survive. You will spend the day bent double, weeding, planting, or harvesting, your eyes fixed on the dirt a few inches from your face. The sky is a vast, indifferent ceiling. The only break in the monotony is the occasional muttered complaint from the man working the strip next to you, or the distant sound of the bailiff, the Lord's overseer, riding by on his horse to ensure you are not shirking. This is the heart of your existence, labor service. You do not own your land. You hold it in exchange for work, 2 or 3 days a week, every week. You must leave your own strips untended and work the Lord's land. This is where you feel the weight of the feudal system most directly. The Lord's harvest must be brought in first, his fields plowed most thoroughly, his hay gathered before yours. Your own survival is a secondary concern, an afterthought in the economic engine of the manor. The work is identical to that on your own plot, but it feels heavier, slower, infused with a deep-seated resentment that you dare not voice. The mainstream historical fact of this life is the three-field system itself. It was a revolutionary for its time form of crop rotation, where one field was planted in the autumn with winter wheat or rye, one was planted in the spring with oats, barley, or legumes, and one was left fallow. To recover its fertility, it was efficient, but it locked you into an inflexible, year-long cycle. The quirky, grimly amusing tidbit is what you actually eat. The bread is dark, dense, and dangerous. It's made from rye, and often contaminated with ergot, a fungus that causes convulsions, hallucinations, and gangrene, a condition known as St. Anthony's fire. You've seen people afflicted by the holy fire. You eat the bread anyway. Hunger is a more immediate terror. Your diet is a monotonous loop of dark bread, thin ale safer to drink than the water, and a pottage of thick stew that simmers over your hearth fire for days on end, into which goes whatever is vaguely edible, cabbages, onions, peas, and, on a very good day, a bit of bacon or a scrap of meat. Historians still argue whether this life was one of brutal, unending toil and malnutrition or a stable, communally focused existence with plenty of holidays and ale. The truth, for you, is probably somewhere in the miserable middle. It is a life of relentless physical labor and profound boredom, punctuated by the fear of famine, the tyranny of the weather, and the absolute power of the Lord who owns the land you work. And when the harvest finally comes, it is a time of frantic, communal effort and immense anxiety. The entire village moves together, a scythe in every able hand, The grain is cut, gathered, and threshed with flails on the barn floor, a dusty, choking job that leaves you coughing for weeks. Then comes the most important moment, the division. The Lord's share is taken first, often as much as a third of the total. Then the church takes its tithe. What is left is divided among the families of the village. You watch the piles diminish, your heart sinking with each portion taken away. This grain must last you until next harvest. It must see you through the hungry gap of late spring, when last year's stores are gone and the new crops are not yet ripe. You have no control over the weather, the taxes, or the system. All you can do is work, and hope, and listen for the bell that calls you to another day of the same. The sound is a dry, grating, rhythmic scrape that seems to originate from inside your own skull. It is the sound of stone on stone, a low, grinding note that has been the soundtrack to your existence since you were old enough to sit up and hold a smaller rock in your hand. The church bell calls you to the Lord's fields. But this sound, this is the music of your own home. It is the sound of the quern, and it is your burden, your birthright, and your prison. Your world, after the vastness of the open fields, shrinks to the forsoot-blackened walls of your cottage. The central hearth fire smolders, filling the single room with a haze that stings the eyes and coats the back of your throat. This is where you spend your evenings and your rest days. This is women's work, they say, but in truth, it is simply the work of those who are not in the fields, and it is every bit as grueling. Before you, on the packed earth floor, sits the quern stone. It's not one stone, but two, a large, slightly concave base stone and a smaller, handheld upper stone, a mono, that fits into your palms. The process is brutally simple. You take a handful of the precious grain you helped harvest, dry barley, perhaps a little wheat if it was a spectacular year, and scatter it onto the base stone. Then, you lean forward, your back already aching in anticipation, and you begin to grind. You push the upper stone away from you in a short, hard shove, crushing the grains against the coarse surface of the base. Then you pull it back, push, pull, push, pull. It is a motion with no grace, no variety, only a repetitive, jarring strain that travels up your arms, through your shoulders, and settles into a permanent knot at the base of your spine. The air fills with a fine, golden dust. It gets everywhere. It coats your hair, your eyelashes, the lines of your face. You taste it with every breath, a dry, floury taste that mixes with the smoke from the fire. This is not the clean, white flour of a modern bakery. This is coarse, gritty meal, full of tiny fragments of the millstone itself, of sand, of husks, of errant bits of chaff that escaped the winnowing basket. It is, by any measure, terrible for your teeth, but it is the stuff of life. This is the hidden labor, the unseen economy of calories. The harvest might feed the village, but it is this daily, private grind that actually transforms it into food. A single hour of this relentless work might produce enough coarse meal for one day's pottage and bread for your family, and then, tomorrow, you will have to do it all over again. It is a Sisyphean task, a wheel of toil within the larger wheel of the agricultural year. Your hands become raw, calloused, and cracked, your wrists grow thick and strong, but they ache with a deep, persistent throb that never truly fades, even in sleep. The mainstream historical fact here is the quern itself, one of the most ubiquitous and longest used tools in human history, found in virtually every Neolithic site and peasant dwelling for millennia. It was technology that never needed to improve because it was brutally effective and required no investment beyond finding two suitable stones. The quirky, painfully literal tidbit is what this grinding does to your body and your teeth. Skeletal remains from medieval peasant graves show not only the expected spinal deformities from field labor, but also extreme and specific dental wear. Their teeth are often worn down to the gum line, not from decay, but from a lifetime of chewing bread laced with abrasive stone grit from the quern. You are quite literally eating your tools. And the product of all this labor? It's not fine flour. It's a rough, wholemeal powder that you mix with water and a bit of sourdough starter saved from yesterday's batch. There is no measuring. It's by feel, by tradition. The dough is slapped into a rough flat round and baked either directly in the ashes of the hearth or, if your village is lucky, in a communal oven owned by the Lord, for which you must pay yet another fee in kind. The resulting loaf is dense, dark, and chewy. It has a sour, nutty flavor, and you can feel the grit of your own labor crunch between your teeth with every single bite. It is the taste of your own existence. Historians still argue whether this daily grinding was a solitary, meditative chore or a social one, with women gathering to grind together and share gossip. The evidence is scant. For you, in this moment, it feels profoundly solitary. It is you, the stones, and the endless, gritty repetition. The rhythmic scrape, scrape, scrape is a lullaby of exhaustion. It is the sound of survival, measured one grinding push at a time. It is the most boring sound in the world. And it is the sound that keeps your children as stomachs from aching with emptiness through the night. You don't think about empires or kings or theology. You think only of the handful of grain in front of you. And the next push of the stone. The world is a heaving, groaning, waterlogged prison. The sound is a constant symphony of misery. The deep, wooden groan of the ship's hull fighting the ocean. The snap and whip of canvas sails high above. The shouted, curse-laden orders of the boatswain. And the relentless slosh of water in the bilges that must be pumped out, hour after hour, lest it drag you all to the bottom. You are no longer on land. You are a sailor aboard a Spanish galleon, part of the vast, lumbering treasure fleet that stitches a global empire together, and your universe has shrunk to a few square feet of damp deck and the terrifying, infinite expanse of the sea. Your only connection to the world you left behind, the only thing standing between you and a starving, scurvy-riddled death, is the mountain of hard, brown, and already suspect biscuit in a hold below. They call it hardtack. The name is a masterpiece of understatement. It is not bread. It is a ceramic-like tile of flour and water, baked rock hard and then baked again to drive out every last molecule of moisture. This is not for taste. This is for survival. It is engineered to outlast time itself, to withstand the rot and the damp of a months-long voyage across thousands of miles of open ocean. Your daily ration is handed out with the solemnity of a religious rite. One biscuit, maybe two. It feels like a piece of the ship itself in your hand. You cannot bite it. You would break your teeth. You must first tap it sharply against the deck or a wooden beam to dislodge the weevils and their intricate, wiggling networks that have already made a home inside. This is not an option. It is the first step of preparation. Then, you dunk it. In what is the question? Ideally, in a little cheap beer or watery wine, to soften it into a mushy, vaguely palatable paste. Often, you dunk it straight into the weevily water from the scummy barrels stored below. Because thirst is a more demanding master than disgust, you eat the resulting soggy, gritty, and faintly moving mass quickly, without thinking, without tasting. It is fuel. It is the calcified energy of Spanish wheat fields, now sustaining you in the middle of an alien, blue desert. This biscuit is the true treasure in a hold. The silver bars and pieces of 8 are just ballast. This is what the empire runs on. Your life is a cycle of watch duty, back-breaking labor, and fitful sleep in a cramped, reeking forecastle that smells of unwashed bodies, brine, and rat droppings. But the true background hum of your existence is hunger, and the profound boredom of the open sea. Days blend into weeks with no change in the horizon, no change in the food, no change in the routine. You are a floating factory of monotony. You watch for sails, for storms, for any break in the soul-crushing sameness. You play dice with your mates for scraps of harder tack. You tell the same stories, sing the same shanties, and feel the same dull ache in your gut. The mainstream historical fact here is the Spanish Carrera de Indias, the meticulously planned and heavily defended convoy system that transported New World treasure back to Spain. Its success depended entirely on logistics, and the most important logistical item was food that wouldn't spoil. The quirky, stomach-churning tidbit is the weevil population itself. Sailors didn't just accept them, they incorporated them. A common saying held that the weevils were extra protein, and some men even developed a perverse preference for the nutty flavor. The grubs imparted to the biscuit. It was a form of maritime seasoning, and the destination of this particular floating larder? Perhaps it's the Manila galleon, embarking on the perilous, months-long traverse of the Pacific. That ship is a universe unto itself, a wooden world carrying not just silver, but silks, spices, and porcelain, and deep in its belly, next to the finery, are the real engines of the voyage. Countless sacks of Mexican maize, and hardtack, and jars of Chilean chocolate to be mixed with water for a sustaining, if gritty, drink. Historians still argue whether the true economic impact of these global voyages was the precious cargo or the accidental relentless exchange of foodstuffs and organisms, rats, cockroaches, and yes, weevils that stowed away in the holds, creating the first genuinely globalized ecosystem. You don't care about economics. You care about the sun-bleached, salt-cracked texture of your biscuit. You care about the feel of the weevil legs caught in your teeth. You are a tiny, insignificant cog in the greatest logistical machine the world had ever seen. A machine powered by wind, ambition, and the most boring, durable food ever invented. You miss the taste of fresh bread with a physical pain. But as you tap your daily ration against the deck and watch a small shower of insects and biscuit dust drift onto the planking, you understand, this dull, disgusting wafer is the only thing tethering you to life. It is the taste of empire, and it tastes like old flour and bugs. The bell that tears you from sleep is not the gentle call of a village church, but the raw, insistent clamor of the town's watchman, signaling the cursed hour of 3 in the morning. Your body responds before your mind does, a deep, cellular ache of protest. It is a pain you know better than your own name. You are a baker in a pre-industrial European town, and your life is a slave to the oven's relentless, fiery cycle. You swing your legs out from the meager straw pallet, your back a solid sheet of protest, your lungs already filling with the ghost of flour dust that perpetually hangs in your cramped living quarters above the bakery. The air is cold, but you know that within the hour, you will be yearning for this chill. You descend the narrow, creaking stairs into the bakery proper. The room is dominated by the oven, a massive, brick-lined beast that is still radiating a residual heat from yesterday's final bake. It is your altar, your tormentor, and your sole reason for existing. The first task is to rouse the flames. You feed wood into its gaping maw, and soon the fire is roaring, licking at the soot-blackened dome. The heat is intense, a physical wall that pushes you back. Sweat, even in the dead of winter, begins to beat on your forehead and trickle down your back. This is your climate. You are a creature of extreme heat and pre-dawn darkness. Your apprentice, a sullen boy of 12 whose family paid you to take him on, is already mixing the sourdough starter, the levain. The mother, with fresh flour and water in a vast wooden trough. The process is one of muscle memory, a ritual passed down through generations of men who have ruined their backs for the sake of bread. You plunge your arms into the cool, sticky mass, kneading it with a strength born of pure repetition. There is no romance in this. It is a battle against a stubborn, living substance. The yeast from the starter begins to work, and the dough slowly transforms, becoming elastic and alive under your hands. You cover it with a coarse cloth and leave it to prove, the first of many waits. Your world is a series of timed intervals dictated by the fermentation of gluten. While you wait, you shape yesterday's leftover loaves into the day's first offering, the pain rassis, the stale bread that will be sold cheaply to the poorest customers to be used for thickening soups, or grinding into breadcrumbs. Nothing is wasted. The economy of your existence is brutal and precise. The first batch of new dough is divided, weight always weighed. For the town's assize laws are strict and the penalties for short waiting are severe and shaped. The loaves are slashed with a blade, a quick, practiced motion that gives each one its identifying mark. Yours is a simple cross, a blessing, and a brand. Then, the moment of truth. Using a long, wooden peel that looks like a giant oar, you slide the raw loaves onto the searing hot floor of the oven. The sound is a fierce, satisfying hiss. The smell that fills the bakery is indescribable, the scent of transforming carbohydrates, of heat meeting life, of the very essence of a town's breakfast. It is a smell you are almost entirely numb to. To you, it is just the smell of work. You bake batch after batch after batch. The heat is relentless. Flour dust coats every surface, including the inside of your lungs. You cough a dry, hacking cough that is the trademark of your trade. Your forearms are covered in small, white burns from brushing against the oven's interior. The mainstream historical fact governing your every move is the assize of bread and ale, a medieval law that still, in spirit, dictates your prices and weights. It was one of the world's first consumer protection laws, designed to prevent bakers from cheating the public. The quirky tidbit is the folklore that surrounds your profession. It is said bakers have a special understanding of the devil's element, fire. Some people cross themselves when they take their bread from you. Others believe a baker's touch can cure warts. You are viewed with a mixture of respect and superstitious suspicion. The man who consorts with the infernal heat that feeds the town. Your customers begin to arrive while it is still dark outside. The servants of the wealthy, coming for the finest white loaves. The laborers, grabbing a dense, dark ride to sustain them through a morning of hulling and digging. You exchange few words. It is a transaction based on need and routine. Historians still argue whether the nutritional decline for the European working class began with the Industrial Revolution or right here, in your bakery, as the preference for increasingly refined white flour status symbol slowly pushed more nutritious whole grains out of the diet of the aspiring poor. You don't care about the debate. You care that the wealthy pay more for the white bread, and that is what you will bake for them. By mid-morning, the last loaf is sold. The fire in the oven is banked. The ashes swept. The trough is scrubbed. The exhaustion hits you then, a wave so powerful it makes you sway on your feet. You climb the stairs back to your room, the smell of fresh bread clinging to you like a second skin. You collapse onto your pallet as the rest of the town is fully awake and beginning its day. You will sleep through the afternoon, through the noise of the street, through the sunlight, and then the watchman's bell will ring again at 3 in the morning, and you will do it all over again. The town needs its bread, and you are the man who makes it, a ghost of flour and fatigue, forever working while the world sleeps. Silence, but not a true silence. It is a thick, living quiet, punctuated by the soft, sibilant sounds of devotion, the rustle of a woolen robe against stone, the faint whisper of a turned parchment page, the measured, rhythmic breath of a man at prayer. This is the soundtrack of your world. You are a brother in a medieval monastery, and your life is a meticulously ordered loop of prayer and work, ora et labora, and your specific labor, your divinely appointed task, is here, in the brew house. You are a brewer of ale. It is a holy duty, and like all holy duties, it is profoundly, mind-numbingly repetitive. The air in the brew house is thick with a sweet, malty steam that condenses on the cold stone walls and beads on your tonsured head. Before you stands the mash tun, a vast wooden vessel that is your entire focus. Your day began hours before prime, as it always does, with the grinding of the malt. You took the barley carefully germinated and then dried in the kiln, and poured it into the stout stone quern. You turned the heavy handle round and round, until your shoulder ached, and the air was hazy with coarse grist. It is the same motion, the same ache, as the peasant women in their hovels, but your purpose is different. Theirs is for survival. Yours is for the glory of God and the sustenance of your brothers. Now, you combine the grist with hot water from the great copper kettle, which is heated over a fire you must tend with constant, devout attention. Too hot, and the mash will be spoiled, a sin of carelessness, to cool, and the sugars will not be extracted, a sin of waste. You stir the thickening, porridge-like mixture with a long wooden paddle, your arms burning with the effort. This is the sacrament, the transformation of grain into something more. The steam carries the scent of cooking grain, a humble, wholesome smell that feels like a prayer in itself. You work in a quiet rhythm, your movements as practiced and precise as the chanting of the Psalms. There is no hurry, only a steady, deliberate pace that mirrors the endless cycle of the canonical hours. Once the mashing is complete, you let the mixture sit. The starches are converting to sugars, a silent miracle you cannot see but must simply trust. Then, you open the tap at the bottom of the tun, and the sweet liquid, the wort, drains into another vessel. The spent grains, the leftover husks and grit, are scooped out to be fed to the monastery's pigs. Nothing is wasted. This, too, is a form of prayer. You add hops, a relatively new innovation, a bitter flour that preserves the ale and adds a pleasing sharpness, and boil the wort, filling the brew house with a pungent, herbal cloud. The mainstream historical fact anchoring your entire existence is the Benedictine rule, specifically the allowance of a hemina of wine, or about a pint of ale, per monk per day. In water and safe Europe, this low-alcohol, nutritious brew was a vital source of hydration and calories, a liquid bread that sustained the monastic workforce. The quirky tidbit, one that would make the abbot raise a stern eyebrow, is the concept of small beer or the even weaker ale often given to novices and servants. It was so low in alcohol that it was considered suitable even for children, making the monastery a place where literally everyone, from the eldest monk to the youngest kitchen boy, was mildly buzzed most of the time. After the boil, the wort is cooled and transferred to the fermentation vats. This is the moment of mystery. You sprinkle in the yeast saved from the previous batch, a living legacy passed down through decades of monastic brewers. Or, sometimes, you rely on wild yeast from the air, a leap of faith that the Lord will provide the right microorganisms. You cover the vat and wait. For days, you listen to it, a soft, bubbling, burping sound that is the yeast feasting on the sugars, creating alcohol and carbon dioxide. It is the sound of creation. It is also, if you're being perfectly honest, the sound of the beer farting. You keep this thought to yourself. Historians still argue whether the monastic obsession with perfecting brewing was driven purely by practical need, or by a genuine theological belief that creating a good, sustaining beverage was a way to honor God's creation. Was it a science or a sacrament for you? The distinction is meaningless. The work is the prayer, the careful temperature control, the meticulous cleaning of vessels, the patient waiting. It is all an act of devotion. You are not making a product for sale, but a provision for your community, a gift. When the fermentation is complete, you rack the ale into barrels. The final product is cloudy, tan-colored, and topped with a thin layer of yeast. It is served to your brothers with their meals. You see them drink it. You see it fortify them for their own labors. In the scriptorium, the garden, or the infirmary, there is no praise. There doesn't need to be. The simple, continued functioning of the monastery is praise enough. You will clean the tun and the kettle, and tomorrow, or the day after, you will begin again. The cycle of prayer and grain is endless. The barley grows, is harvested, is mashed, is fermented, and is consumed, giving the strength to pray for the next year's harvest. It is a closed loop of faith and fermentation. Your life is one of sublime, sacred monotony. The sound is wrong. It is the absence of a sound that has defined your entire life, the rhythm of your existence for generations. It is the silence of the fields. There is no whisper of ripe grain swaying in the wind. There is only the dry, papery rustle of dead stalks and the faint, malicious sigh of a hot wind moving over barren earth. The church bell still rings, but its call is no longer to work. It is a toll, a lament. You stand at the edge of your strip of land, but it is not land anymore. It is a cracked, pale wasteland. The sky is a hard, bleached white, and the sun is a furious, unwavering eye. The rain did not come. The river is a pathetic trickle between wide, muddy banks. The famine has come, and it is so much quieter than you ever imagined hell would be. The anxiety you've lived with your entire life, the low-grade fear of a poor harvest has now curdled into a pure, chilling terror. It is a physical thing, a cold stone in your gut that is heavier than any hunger. You have already eaten the seed grain you were supposed to save for next year. That future is gone. You have eaten the thin, stringy family pig. You have boiled its bones until they turn to mush. You have scoured the woods for anything that might fill the aching void in your children's bellies, roots, bark, leaves. Your wife's face is a drawn mask of desperation. Your children's eyes are too large and their skeletal faces. They no longer cry. They save their energy. The silence in your one-room home is worse than the silence in the field. You join the others from your village on a desperate pilgrimage to the Lord's castle. The walk is a slow, shuffling death march. No one speaks. There is nothing to say. You arrive at the gates, a ragged collection of ghosts. You can smell the bread from the kitchens inside. The scent is a physical torture. The bailiff appears on the wall, his face grim. He tells you what you already know in your soul. The Lord's granaries are low. His own soldiers and household must be fed first. There might be some thin pottage for the children later. A promise that means nothing. You see it in his eyes. You are no longer an asset, a source of labor. You are a problem, a drain, a mouth that cannot be filled. The hopelessness that washes over the crowd is a tangible wave. You turn and shuffle back toward your silent, dead village. The Lord's bread was the last thread of the social contract, and it has snapped. The mainstream historical fact of your suffering is the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317, a catastrophe triggered by a period of relentlessly wet and cold weather that rotted seeds in the ground and decimated harvests across northern Europe. It killed millions. The quirky, horrifying tidbit is what desperate people resorted to calling famine bread. It wasn't bread at all, but a desperate paste made from ground-up tree bark, dried leaves, clay, and even sawdust, mixed with whatever tiny, bitter seeds could be scavenged. It provided no nutrition, but it packed the stomach, providing a cruel illusion of fullness while slowly poisoning the eater or causing fatal blockages. You are now a creature of pure instinct. Your world has shrunk to the next mouthful. You dig in the forest floor for grubs. You set snares for birds so scrawny they are barely more than feathers and bone. You chew on leather straps, trying to suck some nourishment from the animal fats soaked into them. You see others doing the same. You see them eating things that are not food. The social order, the bonds of village and family, begin to fray and then tear. A neighbor is caught stealing a handful of rotten turnips from another's pathetic garden plot. The punishment is swift and brutal, a lesson in an economy where a single turnip might mean another day of life. You look away. You understand the crime. Historians still argue whether these great famines were primarily Malthusian checks on an overgrown population, or the result of sheer climatic bad luck colliding with a fragile, inflexible agricultural system. The debate is academic, a luxury of full bellies. For you, the cause is simple. The sky was empty, and the earth was barren. The complex, interconnected system of manor, church, and village that promised security has revealed itself to be a house of cards in a stiff wind. The boredom of the annual cycle has been replaced by the frantic, terrified scramble of starvation. The grinding of the quern stone has been replaced by the sound of your own stomach gnawing on itself. The silence is broken by the sound of a cart, It is not a welcome sound. It is the death cart. A man from the village, who still has a sliver of strength left, is pulling it through the muddy ruts that were once streets. On it are bundled shapes, small ones. You don't look closely. You know what they are. The churchyard is full. There is no strength left to dig proper graves. The bodies are taken to a pit at the edge of the forest. There are no prayers. The priest died last week. The cart's wheel squeaks on its axle. That is the new sound of your world, a high, lonely, incessant squeak, moving through the silence, collecting the dead. You watch it pass, and you wonder, with a detachment that frightens you, if you will be on that cart tomorrow, or if you will be the one pulling it. The sound is a low, mournful moan that starts somewhere beyond the horizon, a sound that is not quite wind, not quite thunder, but something older and more terrible. It is the sound of the earth, itself leaving. You stand on the porch of your clapboard house, your hand shielding your eyes from a sun that is already obscured, and you watch it come. A wall, a moving, rolling cliff of dust, dark ochre and blood red, 1,000 feet high, swallowing the world whole. This is not a storm. It is the end of the world on installment plan. This is the Dust Bowl, and you are its witness, its victim, and, though you hate to admit it, its architect. The moan rises to a shriek as the front hits. The light vanishes, snuffed out in an instant. Day becomes a grimy, choking twilight. The air turns solid, a suffocating soup of fine, powdered topsoil. It grits in your teeth, cakes your lips, coats your tongue with a taste like dry blood and failure. You fumble your way back inside, but there is no escape. The dust seeps through every crack, under every door, around every window frame you've desperately sealed with wet rags. It settles on every surface in a relentless, silent film. You can write your name in it on the dinner table an hour after you wiped it clean. Your wife covers the children's faces with damp cloths to keep them from breathing it in, but they still cough, a dry, hacking rattle that is the soundtrack of this new, ruined life. You go through the motions of farming because it is all you know. You hitch your mules to the plow and turn over the soil. But it feels like a pointless, blasphemous act. The soil has no substance anymore. It's just powder, the wheat you managed to get into the ground. If you can even get a loan for seed, any more sprouts as a thin, hopeful green fuzz. And then the next black blizzard scours it right out of the earth, ripping the tender plants out by their roots and carrying them off to Oklahoma or Missouri. You plant again. The wind takes it again. It is a Sisyphean nightmare enacted on a continental scale. The boredom of the harvest cycle has been replaced by the frantic, hopeless cycle of trying to start one. Your life becomes a war against the dust. You shovel it from your porch like snow. You wake up to find it drifted against the side of the house like tan, infertile sand. You hear it, always. The faint, constant hiss of it against the windows. The soft patter of it falling from the ceiling onto your bed in the night. You dream in brown. The mainstream historical fact of your suffering is the combination of severe drought and poor agricultural practices, deep plowing that killed the native, drought-resistant prairie grasses that held the topsoil in place. You were encouraged to do it. The government said it would break the sod. They broke the world instead. The quirky, almost surreal tidbit is the static electricity generated by these massive dust storms. The friction of billions of particles rubbing together creates such a charge that static sparks leap from fence posts. You can get a shocking jolt from shaking your neighbor's hand. Women hanging laundry out to dry, a futile gesture. It will be filthy before it's dry. Report their clothes snapping and crackling, clinging to the line with an unnatural force. The very air is alive with a hostile energy, a constant, buzzing reminder of nature's violated power. You try everything. You listen to the government men from the Soil Conservation Service with their newfangled ideas about contour plowing and strip cropping. It feels like trying to put a bandage on a hemorrhage. You watch your neighbors give up. You watch the foreclosure notices go up on their farms. You watch them load everything they have left onto a battered truck, their faces blank with a grief too deep for tears, and point it west toward California, a promised land that may not want them. You hear the word Okie whispered, a new slur for a new kind of refugee. Historians still argue whether the Dust Bowl was a primarily natural disaster or a man-made ecological catastrophe, the result of hubris of seeing the land as nothing more than a resource to be mined rather than a partner to be nurtured. Out here, knee-deep in your own failed field, the distinction feels meaningless. The result is the same. The banks want their money. The land gives none. You sit at your kitchen table, the dust sifting down around you, and you stare at the bills. The numbers are abstractions, but the threat is real. The monotony you once knew, the hard but predictable cycle of sowing, and reaping has been replaced by a different kind of monotony. The constant, grinding anxiety of debt, the daily battle against an invading sky, the hopeless repetition of tasks you know are futile. You are not just fighting for a crop, you are fighting for your home, for your identity. You are a farmer with nothing to farm but dust. The land you loved, the land your father broke behind his plow, has turned against you. It is leaving without you, one terrifying, darkening sky at a time, and it is taking your future with it. The sound is a deep, guttural, diesel-powered roar that vibrates up through the seat of your pants and into your very bones. It is the sound of absolute power. You are encased in a glass and metal cabin, perched high above the earth, and in your hands is the steering wheel of a massive, imported tractor. The air inside smells of hot engine oil, stale coffee, and the sweet, synthetic scent of the insecticide you loaded into the tank this morning. Through the dust-smudged windshield, your field stretches out before you, not in small, painstakingly tended strips, but in a single, vast, geometric block. You are a farmer on the cusp of the Green Revolution, and the world is about to change at a speed that would make your grandfather's head spin. You push a lever. The machine responds with a hydraulic sigh, lowering the complex implement behind you, a seed drill, a fertilizer broadcaster, and an herbicide sprayer all in one. You press a pedal, the tractor lurches forward, and you begin your first pass. The scale is staggering. In the time it took your grandfather to plow a single furrow with his mule, you cover an acre. The implement does everything at once. It parts the soil, drops seeds at a precise, genetically predetermined spacing, deposits a pellet of chemical fertilizer right next to it for instant gratification, and then sprays a fine, deadly mist to ensure nothing else will dare compete for the space. It is farming reduced to a mechanical, chemical process. The connection between your hand and the soil is now mediated by levers, gauges, and the hum of a turbocharger. The boredom is different now. It's not the bone-deep fatigue of manual labor. It's the hypnotic, numbing monotony of driving in straight lines for 12 hours straight. You are an operator, a monitor. You watch the gauges for pressure and temperature. You listen for the change in the engine's note that might signal a problem. Your mind wanders through a haze of diesel fumes. You think about the bank loan for this $50,000 machine. You think about the chemical company rep in his crisp suit who convinced you to buy this new, improved seed variety that requires his specific brand of fertilizer and pesticide to reach its potential. You are no longer just a farmer. You are a node in a global agribusiness network. Your independence is a memory. The mainstream historical fact roaring inside your machine is the work of Norman Borlaug and the development of high-yielding variety HYV wheat and rice. These dwarf varieties, with their short, stiff stalks that could support giant seed heads without falling over, were the biological engine of the Green Revolution. The quirky, almost sci-fi tidbit is the smell. The air around your farm no longer smells of soil and manure. It smells of chemistry, the sharp, acrid tang of anhydrous ammonia fertilizer being injected into the ground, the sweet, cloying odor of pesticides drifting from neighboring fields, the faint, oily scent of diesel exhaust. It is the perfume of progress, and it is utterly alien. The results are, undeniably, miraculous. The harvests are biblical in their proportions. Where your father might have prayed for 20 bushels an acre, you now expect 80, 100. You fill grain elevators to bursting. You are, for the first time in your family's history on this land, genuinely wealthy. You buy a new pickup truck. Your wife gets a modern kitchen. Your children will go to college. The specter of famine, the ancient fear that haunted your ancestors, seems to have been banished forever by chemistry and horsepower. You are a hero, a modern-day alchemist turning fossil fuels and chemicals into golden grain. But there is always a but. You notice the silence first. The fence rows that used to buzz with insects are quiet. You don't see the flocks of birds that used to follow the plow, picking off grubs and worms. The chemical blanket you've laid over the land is non-discriminatory. It kills the bad and the good. The soil itself begins to feel different under your boots, not like a living, breathing thing, but more like an inert growing medium, a brown sponge that merely holds the fertilizer and water you provide. You become dependent on the chemical reps, on their advice, on their products. You are no longer working with the land. You are managing a system. Historians still argue whether the Green Revolution was an unqualified salvation for humanity, staving off mass starvation, or the beginning of a disastrous, large-scale ecological simplification that traded long-term sustainability for short-term abundance. The debate rages in academic journals, but out here, in the cab of your tractor, it's not a debate. It's a quiet, persistent unease you feel when you look at your silent, sterile fields. You've won the war against hunger, but in the process, you've signed a peace treaty that has made you a vassal to oil companies and chemical plants. The crop is bigger than ever, the world is better fed, and you are alone in your glass cab, driving your straight lines, a king of a silent, bountiful, and deeply lonely kingdom. The sound is a low, electric hum, punctuated by the distant, tinny echo of a pop song you don't recognize. The air is cool, climate-controlled to a perfect, sterile blandness. It smells of nothing, not of earth, not of yeast, not of sweat. It smells of cleaning products and the faint, plastic odor of packaging. You are pushing a cart with a slightly wobbly wheel through the fluorescent-lit canyon of a supermarket aisle. This is the culmination of 10,000 years of agricultural struggle, innovation, and toil. This is the bread aisle, and it is, in its own way, the most surreal landscape yet. You are surrounded by a silent, staggering abundance. Shelf after shelf, from floor to eye level, is a wall of uniform, plastic-wrapped loaves. They are all the same perfect shape, a soft, pillowy rectangle, each one a flawless clone of the last. The packaging is a riot of marketing. Heart-healthy, 12 grains, ancient, 0 net carbs. The colors are bright, primary, designed to attract the eye. But the bread itself, behind the cellophane window, is a study in beige. There is no character, no irregularity, no thick, flour-dusted crust or slashed, artistic pattern. It is soft, it is pre-sliced, it is eternal. You reach out and pick up a loaf. It weighs nothing. It has the density of a cloud. You give it a gentle squeeze and your fingers sink into it without resistance. The plastic wrapper crinkling softly. It does not spring back. It stays compressed, a permanent dent in its puffy surface. This is not bread as your ancestors would recognize it. It is a manufactured food product, engineered for maximum shelf life, maximum softness, and minimum nutritional offense. It is the apotheosis of the mundane, the final, boring victory of consistency over character. Your cart is already half full with other testaments to this victory. A box of cereal that claims to be whole grain, but is mostly puffed sugar and food coloring. A package of tortillas that remain soft and pliable for weeks. A box of crackers that will never, ever stale. All of them are descendants of those ancient grasses. All of them are made from wheat that has been so thoroughly refined, bleached, enriched, and processed that it bears as much resemblance to the einkorn of the Fertile Crescent as a plastic flower does to a rose. This is the end of the journey. The grain has been stripped of its story, its terroir, its very essence, and transformed into a neutral, caloric substrate. The mainstream historical fact staring back at you from this shelf is the industrialization and homogenization of the global food supply. The vast majority of these products are made from a tiny handful of high-yield wheat varieties, grown on an immense scale and processed in vast, automated factories. The quirky, slightly depressing tidbit is the crumb of this modern bread. Its airy uniform texture isn't the result of skilled fermentation. It's often achieved through a battery of chemical additives, dough conditioners, emulsifiers and preservatives with names like sodium stearoyl lactylate and azodicarbonamide, a chemical also used in yoga mats and synthetic leather. You are holding a yoga mat. You are about to make a sandwich with it. You toss the loaf into your cart. It lands without a sound. There is no satisfaction in this act. It is a transaction devoid of ceremony or connection. You have no idea where this wheat was grown, who harvested it, or who baked it. It is a commodity, anonymous and interchangeable. The struggle, the dirt, the sun, the weevils, the backache, all of it has been erased, sanitized, and wrapped in plastic. The profound, life or death relationship between humanity and grain has been reduced to a choice between white and 100% whole wheat. You continue down the aisle, the wobbly wheel of your cart thumping in monotonous rhythm on the linoleum floor. Historians still argue whether this shift to ultra-processed foods represents a net good, the elimination of famine and food insecurity for millions, or a public health catastrophe in slow motion, contributing to epidemics of diabetes and heart disease. The debate is neatly summarized on the labels themselves, in the conflicting health claims and nutritional panels. But you aren't debating, you're just shopping. The battle for daily bread is over. It was won, and the victory, you can't help but feel, tastes strangely like nothing at all. The most epic journey in human history, from wild grass to global dominance, has ended not with a bang, but with the soft, unsatisfying squish of preservative-laden foam. You are safe, you are fed, you are bored. The sound is your own breath, slow and deliberate, and the soft, papery rustle of a manila envelope. You are not in a field, not in a factory, not in a supermarket. You are at your kitchen table, and the fluorescent hum of modernity is gone, replaced by the warm glow of a single lamp. Before you, spilled carefully onto a sheet of plain white paper, is a small pile of seeds. But these are not the anonymous, polished grains of industrial farming. These are something else. They are smaller, irregular, some plump and some lean, wearing shades of amber, russet, and deep brown. They are heirloom seeds, and you are holding a piece of history in your hands. You run your fingers through them. They feel different. They have texture, character. These are seeds from a variety of wheat called Red Fife, a hardy, rust-resisted strain that crossed the Atlantic in a Scottish settler's pocket in the 19th century. Or perhaps, these are kernels of emmer, a direct, living descendant of the very first grains your Neolithic ancestors timidly planted. They are not optimized for yield or machine harvesting. They are optimized for taste, for resilience, for memory. This is not an act of farming. It is an act of preservation, a quiet, gentle rebellion against the monolithic sameness of the modern world. The act itself is almost meditative. You are not preparing to plant a field that will feed a nation. You are preparing to plant a small, raised bed in your backyard, or a sunny patch in a community garden. The scale is human again, intimate. You fill small, biodegradable pots with rich, dark soil. You make a small indentation with your finger in each one, a tiny ritual burial. You place a single seed in each hole and cover it gently. You mist the soil with water from a spray bottle. It is a far cry from the diesel roar of the tractor and the 48-row seed drill. It is slow. It is inefficient. It is profoundly satisfying. You are not alone. You are part of a loose, global network of gardeners, farmers, and dreamers, a quiet underground dedicated to preserving biodiversity one small plot at a time. You trade seeds with strangers online, sending carefully labeled envelopes through the mail like illicit treasures. You swap stories about which variety makes the most flavorful pasta flour, which one has the most spectacular golden hue. The mainstream historical fact behind your small act is the existence of the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, the doomsday vault carved into a mountain in the Arctic, which stores backup copies of the world's seeds. But your kitchen table is a kind of seed vault, too, a distributed, living archive. The quirky, heartwarming tidbit is the sheer number of these forgotten varieties. There aren't just a handful of heritage wheats, there are thousands. There is Turkey Red, White Sonora, Black Emmer, Kamet. Each has a story, a lineage, a flavor profile all its own. You are not just growing wheat. You are curating a library of tastes that were nearly lost to time. Historians still argue whether this movement is a nostalgic, ultimately insignificant hobby or a critical act of biocultural conservation, a necessary hedge against the fragility of our monoculture food system. For you, the debate is irrelevant. The value is in the doing, in the reconnection. The seedlings will sprout in a few days, a fragile green against the dark soil. You will watch over them. You will fret about birds and slugs. You will eventually harvest the heads by hand, a few precious handfuls. You will thresh them by beating them inside a pillowcase, and winnow the chaff by pouring the grain from one bowl to another in the breeze outside your back door. You will grind it in a small countertop mill, and you will bake a single, small, incredibly dense loaf of bread. It will be ugly, misshapen, and crusty. It will be the most delicious thing you have ever tasted. It will taste of time and care and a thread of connection that stretches back through centuries of boredom, toil, and triumph, all the way to the very first farmer who ever looked at a wild grass and dared to imagine something more. This small, quiet act is not about feeding the world. It is about remembering it. The journey is complete, from that first, hesitant scatter of seeds in the ancient Near East, to the silent, plastic-wrapped abundance of the supermarket shelf. And now, here, to this quiet act of preservation on a kitchen table. The story of grain is the story of us, of our hunger, our ingenuity, our relentless drive for efficiency, and the quiet losses we accumulate along the way. It is a story without villains or heroes, only people, doing what they must to survive and, sometimes, to find meaning in the mundane. You have trudged behind the ox-drawn plow, felt the ache of the cornstone in your wrists, tasted the weevils in a sailor's biscuit, and driven the roaring tractor under a wide sky. You have known the terror of the silent, barren field and the sterile comfort of the endless bread aisle. It has been a long, long path, and now, in this quiet moment, all that effort, all that struggle, all that history, settles into a gentle, peaceful stillness. The world outside is dark. The frantic pace of the day has finally stilled, There is no more toil to be done, no more fields to tend, no more decisions to make. You can let it all go now. Let the images fade, the golden Mesopotamian straw, the deep black silt of the Nile, the choking dust of the prairie, the fluorescent glow of the grocery store. Let them soften and blur at the edges, melting into a comfortable, velvety darkness. There is only your breath, slow and even. There is only the deep, comforting silence, a silence earned after millennia of noise and labor. You are safe. You are nourished. The long, mundane story is over, and it has brought you here, to rest. So just breathe. Let the weight of 10,000 years of harvest settle around you like a soft blanket. There is nothing more you need to do. Just breathe in and breathe out, and let the quiet carry you away into a deep and dreamless sleep.